Recording has started. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming this morning. I know that it's a Saturday, so much appreciated. Please let this be a very two-sided conversational workshop. So those are the best ones. If you go online and you talk to people like David Orhall, talk to people like Victor Cheng, anybody who's done these workshops before, it's all very communicative between himself or herself and the audience. And that's very indicative of what consulting is all about, essentially, especially when it comes to case interviews. And I want to first and foremost begin by saying that today, I'm not going to be talking about human branding, how to go out there and find a job. I'm not going to be talking about how to best present yourself to a recruiter. What I'm going to be focusing on is specifically case interviews and how to handle them, what you can experience your first time through, the most common types of case interviews, and most importantly, I think, is just the mindset, not only the psychology behind how you should approach it, but most importantly, the psychology of the interviewer, what he or she is trying for you to really find a root cause analysis of when it comes to the case. So I think more and more people are going to be trickling in, and I know on Glip, people wanted this recorded. So on behalf of that, I want to say a lot of the material today is definitely not mine. I would say everything here is just basically secondary research I've done on myself and the intensive case interview practices I've done in the last couple of weeks or so in preparation for my some of my interviews. And I think that most importantly, even though if I don't go into consulting ultimately, just the fact that I did these interviews and these practices, the business intuition, the mindsets, all the soft skill sets are very necessary for you to succeed in any capacity possible. And again, please, I know besides Trevor, because Trevor can talk all day, and you it'd be like entrancing, like an entrancing kind of talk where you just can't stop listening to him. But besides Trevor, if anybody has any questions at all, stop me at any time in regards to the material that I'm going to present today. So now I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you all can see my desktop. If you can't, then I don't want to spend time worrying about that. So apologies on that end, no solution. So yeah, this is a picture I took online. Didn't cite it, so that's already mistake number one by me. And then I put it on there at the title page. But most importantly, this is Case Workshop 101. And this is the agenda. We're not going to go through the entire thing today, clearly. But what I think is really important is focusing on the mindset of the interviewer, the mindset of yourself when you enter into interview. We're going to briefly go over my background and then very briefly go over what a case interview is. I'm going to then pause there for any questions because I think that really is the base framework for case interviews, like case interview 101, if you can think of it from that standpoint. And then we're going to go over some of the common frameworks. I would say that I'm going to talk about some of the major consulting firms right now, why they're different from each other. And yeah, that's basically it. Please ignore the page numbers on the right side. Those definitely do not align with the material. So very briefly, my background, I am a Chinese-born individual who came over when I was 3 years old. So I am pretty much an American citizen and Americanized as you can get. My undergraduate degree was in Purdue University, and I was mostly within supply chain and operations. So I did a lot of math and statistics as my minors, did a lot of work within linear algebra and multivariate calculus from the very first semester due to AP courses in high school. So mathematics and statistics were my strong points. and they are also very strong points that you would need going forward into the consulting industry. No matter what type of consulting you're doing, whether it's management consulting, or whether it's tech consulting, or whether it's strategy consulting. Professionally, I loved working at California. I worked there for 4 to 5 years. I did most of my consulting work over at State Arts, and it was a small enough company that I provided a lot of finance and logistical work as well. Every single job after that, I mean, whether it be a manager or a team lead, you still utilized a lot of the skill sets that are transferable within consulting, such as talking to clients, talking to your customers, being able to negotiate, and most importantly, I guess, really understanding who your stakeholders are. So for me, as a manager, looking back now, I would think that a lot of people, a lot of students think that it's about the customer, about the shareholders, whoever they may be. I'm going to tell you right now, first and foremost, it is your employees. And in consulting, a lot of consultants will tell you that it's your clients, but I still strongly believe it's your employees, from the back end at least. As a graduate student, I'm a current MBA student, graduating real soon. Hopefully I'll have a job by the time I graduate, and then I'm focusing on technology strategy. I want to get into consulting, and then professional interest is the idea of disruption in technology. So you're talking about how the computer industry got commercialized in 30 years, how brick and mortars got destroyed by the online e-commerce industry. And to give you an example, Amazon's destroying pretty much every single brick and mortar right now, and they're destroying even the current, basically the industry giants of the past. Like Walmart right now is trying to play catch up. So if you think about it from that standpoint, Walmart was like what, number one Fortune 500 just a couple years ago, and now they're trying to play catch up. So that's how fast and important it is to keep track of business. I like to problem solve. I like to think about research, and personal hobbies is blah, 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 basketball, football, dogs, traveling, photography. So what exactly is a case interview? For those of you unfamiliar, you have your behavior interviews where they really test what your mindset is, how you approach a problem, conflict resolution, how you approach, I guess, when you're given a very stressful situation, how would you combat that situation, how you work within the team, all that kind of stuff. In a case interview, all they're essentially asking you is they want to basically think about your mindset, think about your thought process and how you would provide value in a professional setting, in a business setting, to a client. So if you're thinking about from a professional standpoint, if you're a consultant working for a pharmaceutical company, you would need to have a deep understanding first and foremost of the pharmaceutical company, and your team would do that on the back end before going to the client site. Your team leader or your consulting partner, whoever it may be, will provide you with the project scope, and then you would first do the research, go to the clients, and it's one of those industries, one of those jobs where you really have to not embarrass yourself, because when a consulting organization hires you, they're not simply hiring your skill sets and your mindsets, but they're hiring how you present yourself to the clients. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you go to the client and you say, "Hi there, my recommendation for you is to destroy or divest your marketing division because they're doing a very crappy job," you're fired. No matter how smart you are, no matter if you're from MIT or Harvard. So it's about presenting yourself in a very professional manner as well. And so that's consulting. So it's very client focused. You have to show respect to your clients. You have to have deep industry knowledge, and you have to be very able to work cross-functionally within teams. I would say like right now, math is very important for a case interview, and that's because when you go to on-site case interviews, you're not allowed a calculator. I guess that differs between company to company, but the ones I've interviewed with, they've never allowed you to use a calculator. So you have to be able to do very simple, like mathematics in your head. We're not talking about doing reverse like logarithms or doing like finite functions, deep functions. We're talking about like, okay, there's approximately 300 million people in the United States, and within that 300 million, about I would say 10% are millennials, or 10% are within the age group of this age group, and within that percentage, another 10% enjoy eating burgers and fries. So I would say that out of the demographic of people within the age group of 10-year-olds to 20-year-olds, this amount equates to the amount of people that can want to eat a burger. Just that type of simple math is all you really need. The common frameworks going forward is all these ones on the right side. So very briefly, some of you might understand these frameworks, some of you might not, but I'm going to go over some of the basics for them and why they work. A framework, essentially, from a high-level standpoint, is a very structured system in place that you can use in terms of analyzing and in terms of trying to find and identify solutions for your clients. So what I mean by that is when you're going into a case interview, they may present you a problem, and then you might be immediately thinking, okay, I should think about it from a marketing standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, from a vendor standpoint, from a marketing promotional standpoint. What the hell am I supposed to do? These frameworks help you slow down, take your time, and then really structure yourself. So that goes along with the second part, which is important note-taking. I wish I had a slide on that, but it's very important to take notes, very important notes. I'm going to try to do this. Hopefully this works very well, but a very common way, and I'm using a touchpad here, so bear with me here. I don't have my Surface Pro Pen on me. Usually what I like to do is I like to have 3 sheets in front of me. One sheet would be over here, and this sheet would be what I call scratch paper. And let's make that bigger. This is what I call scratch paper, and then I would have another sheet of paper immediately in front of me if I'm having a case interview. And this one would be what I call your actual front end view to the interviewer. Does someone have a question? I think I heard something. Okay. And then this last one over here is what I would call data collection. And so I'm really hoping you guys can see this. Everybody can see this, right, what I'm doing right now on Paint? Can people see what I'm currently doing on Paint right now? Someone, please. Trevor? Manas?
Sorry, but I actually don't have the screen up. I'm just listening.
Oh, no worries. Are you able to see my Paint screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So this is usually how I do a note-taking. I immediately, when I go into the interview, I do some type of small talk, and then I get down, and then I say I'm very excited to be here. I'm very humbled to have this opportunity, and then I immediately scratch out 3 pieces of paper. One part on the left is for scratch paper, and this is just basically doing your simple calculations on paper, writing down any type of random notes. On the right side is data collection. So one of the things about case interviews is you're able to ask for data, because really in consulting, you can't simply go to someone and say, I want you to open up and enter into this market because it's going to increase your market value. Okay, all right, where did you get the data for that from? You have to have data collection. So on this side, I always structure it so that I can write clear and concise notes. For example, during the interview process, if I get data, I can write such as, okay, I see. So this new drug that's coming out from a pharmaceutical company, the clinical trials will finish in 6 months, right there. So that's the type of information I would put in data collection. The front end view, I like to split it into this type of mindset, and you can use this framework. You can use, or you can create your own. It's all very individualized. Oh my goodness. Yeah, sorry again, this is using a Surface Pad. So there we go. Bam. Like that. Hey, that's a T, and then I'll go like this. Okay. Let's pretend everything's straight lined in that sense. Up here, basically I write the scope of the question. Or the question, and I'll explain more on this. Over here, I write a lot of information regarding my hypothesis. I'll write my thought process each step of the way. And then over here is where I like to really show from a very structured standpoint my calculations. So let's say, I don't know, profit equals to revenues minus expenses. And then you can dig deeper into that. Let's say, bam, from here, it's very easily, you're going to have in terms of revenues, you're going to have price times your quantity. And then from this side, expenses. I mean, what expenses are you guys thinking about? There's always going to be fixed, and there's always going to be variable. And then you can dig deeper into the trenches, into the weeds. So variable costs, you can get into the cost per unit times, again, the quantity or the volume or whatever amount of product or service or, I guess, whatever service you're providing in that case. So this is more like the quantitative part of it. This is more like my hypothesis and thought process. And down here is just any type of extraneous information that I would like to have that I want to make sure the interviewer can see. So the most important part about this section is that it's front end view, so the interviewer can see what I'm writing down. And then scratch paper is basically blah, 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 just writing over a lot of random information. So now, basically, you have 3 sets of information here going with the interviewer. The thing about case interviews is they want to really identify how you think about, how you approach about a business problem, and they're going to give you a business issue. It can be 1 to 2 sentences. It can be an entire sheet of paper that gives you the background information of the company and the current situation, the current stakeholders, the current main issues, and then what thoughts and processes and you want to go through. Or it can just be simply very profits have been going down for this company in this year, but overall the market share of the company has increased. Can you give me an explanation for this? Something very simple as that. But as soon as you do get that question, have these 3 types of paper for your, I guess, your note-taking, and you don't have to use my framework. You can use any type of framework you want. But what's important is that this one right over here, this is the one that you want to be visible to the interviewer. So at any portion of the interview where, let's say, you are able to really break down and get to the next step, like my hypothesis is that this is a revenue issue. Do you have any information regarding the financials of the number of people buying the product as well as the price per product? And the interviewer says, actually, I do. So he hands you this information. What you can do is you can say, okay, This is a very interesting case. It's very interesting. To better understand and make sure I'm solving the right problem, I'm going to reiterate what all the information you gave to me, and essentially, is this what you want? Um, Profits have been decreasing and expenses have stayed the same. So as a result of that, I believe that it's a revenue issue. Turn this sheet around. So this sheet, this front end view to the interviewer, turn it around and say, based on my hypothesis, this is what I have. This is information I've gathered by the information. Is this the right direction you want me going through? Is there anything else you want? Always reiterate the question back to the interviewer. That's very, very important, and it's best practice for a case interview. So that is note-taking in a sense, and that's very important. Your data collection, this part right over here, you can show this to the interviewer as well, but if you're going to do that, make sure you write it very clearly. Make sure you write the right data. That's very important. Make sure you write it in the order that they're given to you so that they understand you're very structured. Scratch paper part, this is the part that you put like, some sort of on the side over there and just cover with your hands and do your mathematics or do your equations. Any questions on this part? Because this is very important. I think note-taking is one of the hardest, but one of the best practices going into a case interview. All right, I'm going to take that as a good sign. No questions at all on that front. Going back now to parts. Okay, so very briefly, in terms of the frameworks, so for those of you who have not been taught this yet, the 4 Ps is a framework you would use in terms of marketing. So if you think about a business case in market entry, you would have to think about the product, place. Place in this case means placement. What channels and distribution are you putting the product on? Is it on online retail? Is it on an online platform such as Amazon? One ping me. Okay. Is it on an online platform such as Amazon, or is it on the shelf within, let's say, Ralph's or Macy's, or is it I don't know, through some other types of channels, wherever the product is placed? Promotion is basically the channels of marketing you're using. It can be Google AdWords these days. That's being used a lot. It can be your traditional 30-second TV spot. It can be your specific online video advertisement based off of data analytics that's targeted toward a specific audience. Whatever it may be, and these days I think it's going more digital, and that's a little going out of scope here. But yeah, that's promotion right there. And then price, which is ultimately a big important part of it, whether it's market entry or whether it's, let's say, a revenue profit issue problem. The 4 Cs is another framework where you're talking about the customer, you're talking about the company, the competition, and then partnerships, collaborators. So it's called 4 Cs. It's also called 3 Cs and 1 P, which means customer, company, competition, and partners. There's the Porter's 5 Forces. I'm not going to go deep into this, but this is a overview of the industry. So ultimately, at the end of your analysis of a Porter's 5 Forces, you will be able to say this industry is easy, medium, or hard to get into, to enter into because of these 5 factors and forces. Then there's firm analysis. This is very high level stuff in terms of generalized. It's just internal versus external. There's microeconomic analysis. One of the most common ones over here is your profit equals revenue minus cost. There's value chain analysis, and that's thinking about the entire value chain. So to give you one example, you think about like how a how a Starbucks coffee is made. The value chain in this case is you are given the coffee beans, then you put it into the machine, and then the machine grinds it and then puts it into coffee format. One customer stays in line, goes through the process, orders the coffee from the person on the other side, and the employee then takes the order and then writes on the cup exactly what type of coffee it is, hands it to someone else, or him or herself will go to the coffee machine, pour the coffee, give it to the customer, thank him, take the money. Customer takes the coffee, drinks it in a spot there, sits down or leaves the room, and then the entire process will continue. That's the value chain essentially, like going through your entire process as well as the different functions that you go through. So if you can think about value chain as a process, and you can think about it from a business standpoint. What types of marketing, finance, what types of operations, what types of supply chain, what types of shipping are going through within your company, and then analyze each and every portion of them. And then financial analysis. So you're looking at your basic balance sheets, income statements. You're looking at your cash flow statements. Income statement is basically a snapshot of your profit and loss for whichever quarter, whichever year. A balance sheet is a present view of your current assets and your current equity, so such as stocks. And then you have your liabilities, such as debt, and your cash flows is essentially the amount of money and that's coming into your company. So they're all interconnected. Just one quick example of this, and I don't want to really dig deep into it, is if you're on your income statement, you're making your profits. Then from there, once you get that profit, whether it be earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or whether it just be simply profit, net income, your decision can be to either plow back that into the company, in which case then you can relate that to the cash flow statement in terms of the amount of cash that you want to put back into the company, how much you want to put into dividends, and how much you want to put into, let's say, repurchasing the stock shares. These are all interrelated, and I'm not going to go deep into it, but that's just one quick example. Other frameworks I would say is important is, all right, let's go back to paint. New. So these are some very important ones I think that really impresses people. And one of them is the BCG 2x2 matrix. BCG is one of the highest rated management and strategy consulting firms out there right now. So over here you would have a 2x2 matrix, and you would have high, low, and then you have low, and you would have high, and you would have low. And then on this side over here, it can be anything from, let's say, your profit, you can say market share. And then on the x-axis, it can be, let's say, number, or let's say it's your size of company. So generally speaking, I think I mix these up over here. 1 second. Yeah, I mix these up. So here's another framework. If you were to think about a question like, okay, so you have a lot of competitors right now in this case interview question, and you're looking at them, you can use this matrix, and then you can say, okay, based off of this information, looking at the information, the market share data on there for this company is very high, and the market share is very high, and the size of the company is very big. So from that standpoint, you usually want to be within this quadrant, because it means that means you're a superstar company. But then if you're low in market share, and let's say the size of your company is low, then that usually means that there's room for growth, or that this is a company that you don't really need to see as a competitor. Those are just the type of analysis you can have from using the 2x2 BCG matrix. Other frameworks is, I would say, McKinsey's mergers and acquisition framework. So this one is simply just, you think about the acquired company by itself, stand alone. So we're talking about their profits, their financials, their cash flows, how much they're evaluated in terms of any type of method. So you can use discounted cash flow. You can use comparative company analysis. anything that investment bankers would use to get an evaluation of the company. You would look at their processes internally, what types of I guess competitive advantages they would have. You will look at their value propositions. That's from one standpoint. Then you would, I'm going to delete this. So you would have acquired company standalone, then you have the synergies that come between them. So when you talk about synergies, what's very important is culture. You have your activities. I call this ARS or ARC. So that's activities, resources, and capabilities. What else is there for synergy? Like headcount and cost savings, efficiency and processes. And then over here is just extraneous information. So you're looking at an MMA, you have to think about legal, think about the political landscape. You can think about like here's another framework, pest analysis. So you're talking about like political landscape, the environmental landscape, social, and the technological landscape. So you'll be using a framework where you're thinking about the company that's acquired by itself, the synergies after acquiring the companies, and then all the other extraneous information. So this is another framework that's very important. Another one is McKinsey's 7 S's. So if you think about Porter's 5 Forces as a very good understanding of whether you should enter into industry or not, McKinsey 7S is a good internal analysis of a company, such as its staff, such as its like skill sets and strategies, and there's 6 elements. And then what's ultimately the takeaway here is how do those 6 elements, they split it into the soft elements and the hard elements. How do they combine together to really create that shared value, create that mission statement, create that vision and ultimate goal of that company going forward? I'm not going to draw it out. It's pretty hard, but you can Google it if you want. So I'm going to just type it here right now because it's recording. McKinsey's 7 S's. Very good way to do a framework internally. Internal framework of a company. So yeah, I'm going to leave this here for a little bit. Any questions so far on any of those other frameworks I mentioned? Those are more advanced ones besides your simple 4 Ps and 3 Cs and 3 Cs and 1 P and all those things. Okay, I'll take that as a good sign again. So moving forward, one of the main things you have to be able to understand as a consultant is you have to be able to read data and to read charts and understand immediately what type of information you're given. For example, over here, it says exactly on the top the 6 months results in terms of revenue per GM per unit and units sold in 6 months. So over here on the left side, you immediately know that these are your names of your product. On the right bottom side, this is your gross margins in terms of US dollars, and it shows you exactly you're comparing gross margins to revenue. So that means that if you think about it, your revenue, and then revenue is broken down into, let's say, the amount of quantity times the price of what you're charging the customer. And then gross margins, a formula for that is essentially basically your ultimate profit divided by your revenue. So you're comparing basically what your original revenue was, you take away all the expenses, and now what you're left over, oh man. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to here, paint. So from that standpoint, you would have your revenue, you have your minus your expenses, and that would give you your bottom line. And your gross margin in this case is profit divided by revenue. And it's usually, that's why it's called a margin, because it's a percentage. So that means that you can immediately correlate what gross margin is to revenue. So you can use whatever mathematical formula to multiply it and cross it out to get whatever answer you need from that standpoint. So right now you understand that, you look at the information, so they're comparing how much revenue you're making and what types of, out of that revenue, how much of it is actually you're taking as profit in terms of a percentage. So looking at this right now, very quickly speaking, this company is doing very well. I mean, you look at their products, it seems like all their gross margins are over 50% of revenue. Does anyone have any questions in regards of what I just said? Because that's one takeaway you can immediately get within 1 second of looking at this graph. Okay, so that's very important. So with that said, I'm going to now enter into the next part of my workshop, which is best practices in the mindset of an interviewer. So before I begin, I don't think I have slides on that. Okay, I don't. So what I'll basically explain is that from an interviewer mindset, I'm going to use Paint again. Wow, this is so old school. So from an interviewer mindset, when you go into a case interview, the main thing they're trying to do here, interviewer, the main thing they're trying to understand is, number one, how you think, your thought process. Number two, how you communicate, how you present yourself, particularly to the client. And number three, how you ultimately bring everything together, all the information, all the data, into one final high-level recommendation. So that's ultimately what the interviewer wants to look from you. And if you think about it, behavior interviews are ultimately how you would behave in situations. Case interviews in this point, you think about it, how you think, how you communicate, how you present yourself, how you bring the data together. That's really from an analytical standpoint, how analytical you can think, how you can process information, how quickly you can work under pressure, because the interviewer is right in front of you and there's a time limit, and you have to ultimately bring all the information together into one final recommendation. You just gave me demographic information, you just gave me financial information, you just gave me information on the competitors. How do I bring all that data together? How do I construct it into a very structured note-taking? At the same time, you want to be able to communicate with them your step-by-step process, how you thought about going into the next step of the process to find your recommendation. And ultimately, once you bring all your information together, to give you one example, you can find out that, let's say, one financial takeaway, you can think about like one competitor takeaway. For example, the competitors have an inferior product based on price as well as functionality. To me, right away, that screams, bam, you have a commanding product. You should immediately push this product out at a higher price and go maybe focus more on promotions then, because your product is higher. Promote it through whichever channel. It can be, let's say, social media. It can be through traditional advertising. It can be through the other outsourcing to an advertisement agency, if that's not your strong point. So if your company does not have a strong advertising or a strong marketing segment, then you would need one recommendation is you need to outsource an advertising agency. You're given all this information. Those are your three main takeaways. Ultimately, what are you going to say to the client? So your final recommendation can be, okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. After looking at all the data collection from me to you as a client, I would highly recommend that based off of the financial information A, B, and C, the profits are this, the revenues are this, and because of that, this is a takeaway from that. In addition, your competitors have inferior products, and they also have, based off of price, the prices they're selling at, the price that you're selling at, as well as functionality. And because of that, one takeaway is that you should increase the price from that standpoint. But in addition to price, you don't want to get into a price war. So maybe you would want to focus as well on promotional strategies such as social media. And maybe this is more of a, let's say, older company, and their target audience demographics is more along the lines of, let's say, baby boomers, so 50, 60, 70-year-olds. So you would want to use traditional advertising such as TV, media channels. And through all those three recommendations, I strongly believe that you can then generate and solve the ultimate project scope that was given at the beginning of the case. Of course, you wouldn't say solve the project scope. You would say solve the quote issue that was given at the beginning of the case, unquote. And that would be your final recommendation. And you would say it in a very respectful manner. Any questions on that in terms of how you would communicate to an interviewer? Okay. Some other tips for an interviewer is number one, stay poised. Last thing you want to do is start fidgeting. Communicate your thought process. One of my rules is never stay silent for more than 10 to 15 seconds. So if you want to think about it from actual real world perspective, if a client's in front of you right now, you're meeting him or her for the first time, and you ask for a piece of information, they give it to you. I mean, can you just imagine if you were just standing there in front of him or her for 10 or 15 seconds, not saying anything, and just staring at him or her? That's very awkward, right? So the same thing in terms of the case interview. You never want to stay silent for more than that time. If you do decide that you need information and more time to get your thought processes and your frameworks in mind, then you can respectfully say, okay, thank you so much for this information. Kindly speaking, may I have 30 seconds to go over my thought process, which I will then explain to you afterwards. Just ask that in a very respectful manner, and then the interviewer, this shows to them that you are very client ready, you're very professional, you're very poised, and that you definitely have a measurable time limit so that they can understand that you're going to have this information for them within this time frame. It's not simply saying, can I have time to go over my thoughts? Because then they're like, okay, yeah, sure, absolutely, but then they have no idea exactly when that time frame is going to be. So you want to make sure your interviewer at every step of the process understands how much time, what your thought process is, what your next steps are going to be. And if you're going to ask for this type of time, then you better have something big afterwards. So you can say like, thank you again for the time. And again, I would say you don't have to say thank you every single time. I think after a while it seems like a suck up. It depends from company to company. A lot of the big companies like BCG and McKinsey, they really try to focus on the fact that you should always thank them because it, first of all, allows you to look at them, smile, and give personality. And second, it allows you to really reframe and readjust and give yourself more time to think of how you're going to phrase your question. It basically brings you more time. But in my opinion, these days, you don't need saying thank you again and again is just not best practice in my opinion. But that differs from person to person. So if you're going to ask for that much time, you want to be able to give something along the lines of, thank you again for the time. After looking at the data you provided to me, I would say that this is a profit issue, and to begin, My hypothesis, given the information provided, is that the driver for the issue is on the cost side. Going forward, I am going to X, Y, and Z. And then you can turn that sheet of information that I said, the one that you want to show your client, to show them that this is what you did and what you wrote down in those 30 seconds, to show them this is your thought process. So this is very respectful to the client, to the interviewer. It shows them that you are able to really structure your time carefully. So I'm going to kindly ask you for 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, I'm going to really do some deep thinking. But after those 30 seconds, most importantly, I have a very clear value, a very clear process and steps going forward. And for the interviewer, this tells me that you are very clear in your thinking, that you can immediately take information, think about a time frame that you would need to process that information, and then you can process it and then have actionable steps going forward. Not recommendations, but actionable steps going forward. So in consulting, your build. So your human capital, your worth is how much your bill rate is. There's consultants out there who, in terms of, let's say you're a partner with the McKinsey, you're literally getting billed like hundreds of dollars every single hour. So by saying I'm going to only spend about 30 seconds over here to think about my process, then you can equate that to, let's say, however amount your bill rate is, because from their standpoint, they're thinking, oh wow, okay, 30 seconds, that's not bad. I mean, I'm getting charged here $100 per hour, so 30 seconds is perfectly fine as long as they can provide for me the information over here, number 4, after they process the information. So every single part of the time, which brings to my main takeaway, is that the entire interview process, you have to bring value in any way possible. And what I mean by that is, if it's a clear profit issue and you start talking about demographics and you start talking about, let's say, the political landscape or regulations, then that's not bringing value to the interviewer. And luckily, in a case interview, they will bring you back along the pathway. They might say something like, that is good information and to think about, but in this scope, in terms of the project scope, in terms of what the client's asking this question, you should consider that irrelevant. And what that tells you is that that's the wrong direction you're going toward, and then you can say, thank you for that. I'm then going to come back over here, and you can say, look at your data and try to readjust your scope going forward. So any questions on terms of like best practices for the interviewer? Okay. So there's that. My last part, it's already 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go over here. Let's see. Give you an idea of the current consulting companies right now in terms of strategy and operations and the positioning. A.T. Kearney, Bain, BCG, McKinsey, those are all the top ones. Galt is one of them. You have your big 4, so those are like your more accounting firms that also have diversified product offerings within consulting, like Deloitte, KPMG, EY, and PwC. In terms of technology and systems, IBM has their GBS Global Services in their consulting division. EY also has a big technology and systems. I would say, in my opinion, Accenture, in addition to being probably the largest in terms of scale and size of all these firms, is one of the top industry leaders in terms of technology and systems. So we're talking about technology consulting, we're talking about digital consulting. So IoT, the digital transformation, going from your traditional data centers and servers, which have high overhead, high costs, toward the cloud services where you can have cost savings, consolidation of data information. Then you think about big data, think about the future technology, AR, VR. How can you monetize that? Which industries can that disrupt? All that information This is all the things that you can think about when it comes to technology and systems. And I only sort of went deep into that because that's my passion and that's the path that I'm trying to go into. Then there's these boutique firms. So these are more niche firms. Gartner, Hitachi, FDI, Protiviti. They're very focused on, let's say, cybersecurity, very focused on certain amounts of definite industries like pharmaceuticals and technology and let's say the consumer packaging industry. They're very focused and niche within those, whereas the ones on the left side they do business to business with many different kind of companies. And then there's the HR ones, and there's also the smaller ones as well going forward. So with that said now, are there any questions on everything I mentioned? And it's a quiet crowd here today. I'm going to take a look at who's on here right now. Nobody has any questions at all?
I sure don't. Nicely done, Tony.
Thanks, Trevor. Can you please ask me a question? Like, I really do not like this non two-way conversation. Any kind of question you have at all on anything I just mentioned?
Let's see.
Pretend like you're Ripka.
Yeah, I guess. I think a good starting point would be: can you possibly show a few different ways you've tried to do the note taking, and explain why you chose the method you ultimately chose over others? Because I know for some people there's different things that are helpful, and there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I'm going to first take a step back from that question and explain it with your second part of it, which is there's no one size fits all. So within consulting, which one was it? I think it was this one. You look at all these frameworks and you look at all the ones that I mentioned previously. You're not going to go into a case interview and say, okay, well, right now I'm going to start using 4Ps, and in terms of product, it's this. In terms of placement, it's this. And then after that, I'm going to now do a Porter's Five Forces so I can understand the industry. You do that, and immediately the interviewer is in their mind secretly laughing at you from a very, I guess, from a kind standpoint. That's how they're thinking right now. They're thinking, wow, I can't believe this individual is actually naming the frameworks. What you want to do ultimately is take the frameworks and then use a combination, customize it to your own personal value. So now answering the first part of your question, Trevor, to give you an example of how I did a note-taking process. I had a case yesterday, a practice case with one of my good peers. I'm not going to name him or her because because this is recording, but it was a high-level case, and it was given to her, and she's currently going to go into a senior management consulting position over at Accenture. And the issue here was, all right, let's go back to Paint. Oh man, I wish I should have used some other software for this. So immediately I have my three main parts. I'm going to have the biggest one over here. I think that's probably the most important, and then information over here. So I'm going to now type to you very quickly what the project information was. This was what was given to me from her standpoint, and here's an example. So this example over here was, you have a company, and it is a telecommunications company, just did a M&A, mergers and acquisition of 4 companies. And these 4 companies are all very IT based, and they're currently in the stage of combining the mergers, processes, and structure of all the companies together to form, to consolidate for the client's company. Basically, you just acquired 4 companies, and then you're going to try to basically bring them into your company from that standpoint. And try to make sure that you consolidate it and everything is efficient. And the client company in this case, let's just call it Client Trevor. So Client Trevor Incorporated. And then with that said, at the same time, market share has gone up by 8% year by year. What else did she say? This is off the top of my mind right now. Let's see. Oh yeah, but however, profits have gone down 4% year by year. What the CEO did was go to the CTO as well as the CIO, have them combine together to create an action plan / roadmap going forward with this M&A acquisition. What are some recommendations you can provide to Trevor Incorporated given the information above? Was it good? And let me again, actually I forgot one more part. What the CEO did was go to the CTO and the CIO and specifically say, combine together to create an action plan going forward. So this was information as far as I can remember. I did about like 4 or 5 yesterday, so the information is all jumbled. But I think this is the general gist of it. So again, this is your scratch paper. This is what you want to show to the client, and this is your data collection. So I always start with this from the first standpoint, and then what I did was I split it again into this framework over here. And again, you don't have to use this framework. As you do more and more practice, and practice is key here, I believe the last Illinois Business Consulting student director did about a couple thousand. The number increases more and more as you keep asking people, but the legend is that he did thousands of these. So practice makes perfect is definitely applies here. So immediately I had this framework started and I said, okay, well, thank you very much. This is a very interesting case to the interviewer. And I said her name. And I said, especially because I'm very interested in this industry. However, I do have a couple questions and I want to make sure that I understand the scope and exactly what the client wants going forward. You provide a lot of information for me, so I'm going to reiterate that information back to you. And to do so, while she was communicating all this information here, all the way from telecommunications to ultimately what are some recommendations you can provide, I was quickly writing down notes like crazy over here, blah, 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 like that on the side of the paper. And while writing notes, I would try to keep them structured, but ultimately I would try to bring the high level parts of it. So from the scratch paper side, it's like, okay, so it's telecommunications, it's mergers and acquisitions. She mentioned some financial information like market share and profits going down. And then she also then brought in the piece about the CEO of the company came inside, told the chief technology officer and the CIO, make them create a team and then tell them to create an action plan going forward. So I wrote down action plan. I wrote down roadmap because she specifically mentioned roadmap. So right now, I'm going to actually put some people on the spot here because this be a little bit more interactive. Let's see. Stacey, are you there? Okay. Jack, are you there?
Yeah, what's up?
Not much, man. I'm gonna put you on the spot here, okay? So it's completely okay. So I'm not sure how much you read of the information here, but given the start that I did. So basically, I came inside. I told her right now I listened to her information, and you can read it at the top above over here. And then while she was reading this information, I wrote all this information down. And then I said to her, okay, um, can I please reiterate the information back to you so I can understand that I'm going the right direction and this is exactly what the client wants? In addition to that, is there any other information that the client needs? So after that, what do you think the next step should be? Let's say I'm the interviewer and I say, absolutely, please go ahead and reiterate the information that you were given to me, and I can let you know if that's exactly what the client's asking for. Jack Wang.
Okay, so that's right after I asked the question, or or you asked me like what question should I be asking based on the scratch?
Yeah, right after you basically asked her, is it okay if I reiterate some of the information you gave to me so I can make sure exactly what the project scope is going forward?
Okay, of course. So if I were to reiterate this question, it'd be something like so in this scope, our client is in the telecommunications industry, and they are trying to have an merger acquisition deal right now, and in this case, they are trying to look at our for we're trying to look out for our client's company. They're trying to look at, for example, their market share, and in this case, the market share is going up by 8% year by year. However, the profit is going down by 4%, and so we are so in this scope, we are trying to create an action plan, to be exact, a roadmap to see how this merger acquisition can go.
Okay, great. And
My take.
that's really good what you did so far. What the heck did I just make? It's supposed to be a check mark, and then it's supposed to be a circle over the check mark. And all right, I'm just going to stop from that. Anyway, so one of my questions in the beginning is exactly, I understand what an action plan is, but it's very okay at this point to say to her, okay, so from my standpoint then, is a project scope essentially to create an action plan and a roadmap for this mergers and acquisition? And at the same time, is there any other information you want us to provide? So you mentioned telecommunications as an industry. It's a mergers and acquisitions case. There's market share information and there's profits going down. But it says right here, what the CEO did was go to the CTO and the CIO and specifically say, so I really want to focus here, specifically say, combine together to create an action plan and a roadmap going forward with the M&A recommendations or acquisition. What are some recommendations? So right there, this tells you what the scope is. In the question, he or she in this case, right away just told you over here, this is what we want. We want an action plan and a roadmap for this telecommunications company that's very IT based. So when you were given that information, from my interviewer standpoint, what I would say then is absolutely, or actually, I'm sorry, what I would say is, in addition to what you just said, Jack, which is very great, is from what I can see, it appears that the client really wants a recommendation of an action plan and a roadmap in terms of what's going to happen for this company to best synergize these four companies together into the original company, Trevor Incorporated. Is that the project scope, main project scope going forward? Is there any other information or anything else you want me to answer? And from an interviewer standpoint, I would say, no, you're absolutely right. That is very good information provided, a very good summary. And yeah, that is ultimately your project scope. In that case, then I would say thank you very much for that information. Right now, I'm going to, if you could please provide me maybe 30 seconds or so to collect my information, collect my structure, and then I will come back to you and provide to you my hypothesis. So immediately from over here.
Let's thought to do it a little differently.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said the last part of what you said is interesting because I've been taught to do it a little differently. We're on the same page with the introduction there and clarifying scope and asking follow-up questions to really gain a factual understanding. But I've been taught to go from that into a brainstorm and actually show the interviewer what my brainstorm is, and then once I have that brainstorm, which is either potentially lists or buckets of information, essentially ask the interviewer which of those particular buckets they're most interested in, given sort of the brainstorms that have been elaborated on.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and that is a way to go forward for like I would say a smaller question. This one was a more of like a really high level one, and it was like it's supposed to be like I would say an hour case interview, and that's pretty much how long it took. From this standpoint, I had to make the scope very clear from the beginning, and then everything you just mentioned, Trevor, in terms of brainstorming some information and then asking the client, is this a direction you want me to go toward? That's going to come right after, as soon as I identify the main high level project scope. And then from there, I can then explain to them, okay, here are some thoughts and here are some processes. And my hypothesis is this. Do you think that this is the right direction going forward? And is that sort of what you were trying to go at in terms of like, brainstorming and then trying to see which direction to go to?
Oh, I see. When you were talking about 30 seconds, you were still talking about the scope.
30 seconds is more like where you would collect information you've been given so far. You now clearly know what the scope is. You have some bunch of scratch information, and then you're now going to try to think of some, like you mentioned, brainstorming some ideas, and then show it to the client, communicate with them afterwards how you got those brainstorming information, and from there do exactly what you just said at your portion.
I see.
Okay, so like over here, I would say then the project scope is very clearly create an action plan roadmap that combines Trevor Incorporated with the four M&A companies. And this can go along with in terms of how you would structure and how you would image your information to the clients or the interviewer. And then from there, then I would say, with your permission, can I please have about 30 seconds or so to collect my information and think about take all the information you gave to me and think about how I would proceed from there. And the interviewer in this case said, absolutely, please take your time. And then from there, I immediately began to think about, okay, this is the mergers and acquisitions case. So on my scratch paper again, I put information such as, let's see, like you have your standalone value of the companies. You have your, and I'm using McKinsey's M&A model here. You have your synergies, and then you have your other factors such as political, regulations, environmental, all that kind of stuff, technological. And then I also saw over here that it's very IT based. So in addition to that, I want to make sure that, IT, what is some of the IT stuff out there? So there's cloud, there's data centers, there is IoT, and there's software implementation, there's SAS, IaaS, all that kind of stuff. So I wrote down that type of information there. And then from there, like you mentioned, Trevor, I brainstormed everything and I said to her, thank you for that time. Thank you for that information. Given everything that's said, I believe that this is a mergers and acquisitions case, and we want to make sure that these four companies are combined slowly into Trevor Incorporated so that it's efficient and the culture is there and the people and all the main stakeholders all combine together very efficiently so that the process going forward is very well done and that there is no, let's say, inefficiencies or there's no lack of good process improvement going forward. Because one of the main things in the mergers and acquisitions part is the fact that you try to just combine everything together at once and a mess. You have people from one company going to the other. The people in one company can be of a certain demographic, a certain type of culture, using a certain type of software their entire lives. They come into a different company now, Trevor Incorporated, that's using the latest technologies. How are you going to fix that? All that type of stuff. So that's the type of process and information in my thought process going forward, clients. And with that said, I'm going to now try to create an action plan and a roadmap. But before I do so, I have a couple questions. So for me, in this case, I have a general idea of what an action plan is, but can you exactly explain to me what a roadmap is? And so I wasn't exactly sure what she meant by roadmap. So that's another takeaway for, in this case, is that you can ask questions if you don't understand terminology. So like, I guess another takeaway, another key tip, acronyms, industry knowledge, terminology. If you are not sure what they mean, just ask. Roadmap, it's intuitively, you can think of it as action plan. Intuitively, you can think of it as just like a process going forward of how you're going to combine these 4 companies with Trevor Incorporated, but then ultimately, what's their definition of it? Is there anything outside of that that can maybe help me in terms of information? So what she did, or what she or he did in this case, and I'm just going to call her she now because I think I began so much with she that it's clearly the interviewer was a girl. What she did was say, okay, Tony, so to answer your question, this is actually a roadmap in this case is very technological based in terms of how you would combine the IT departments and the action plan you would have in terms of combining the IT departments for that company going forward. So by asking that question, I was just given a whole bunch of very important information. And this is where you would put in your data collection page. So by asking what a roadmap is specifically for this client, she told me, number one, it's going to be IT based in terms of the mergers and acquisition. Number two, so I have to think about it from a technology standpoint and in terms of like a software standpoint, what types of devices, hardware they use. And at the same time, number three, this is why they are using the CTO and CIO from that standpoint. So I put that down for information. So I say, thank you for the information. And now, with that said, do you have then any information like this is now where you would then communicate with the interviewer. So I'm going to then challenge you, Jack, right now again, like based off of all the information you have right now, very clean on this side. It's very IT based, and this is the project scope, and this is your scratch page information. What do you think the next step should be for a case interview? What would you do next?
For the IT-based part?
Just in general, like if you were given all the information that we've gone through so far, what would your next step be?
Okay, so I think I probably missed out from the scratch part when I was summarizing. I realized that the questions specifically state CTO and CIO. So obviously, this is a high level. It's like a high level strategy case from the technology side. So I guess it's probably not a good idea to go into too much detail in terms of like the exact devices or hardware that we're supposed to look at. So I guess I will divide it up to the 3 parts: value, synergy, and technology. So for standalone value, I think I'll probably ask for things like financial information of these merger companies to see how they're doing in their how these companies are doing in terms of their value. And in terms of synergy, I would look at, for example, their company culture, their demographics. But I don't think I'll spend too much time in that part because, again, we're looking at the technology side. And for the last part, technology, obviously, I think this is the most important part. So I'll look at, for example, what kind of what kind of system they're using, and is it compatible with what we have at Trevor Incorporated, and obviously same for software. So I think I'll just call it compatibility in terms of technology. Yeah.
All right, excellent job. Excellent job. I have found a good successor for sure. So basically, you're right. You hit a lot of the key points. And essentially, this is one of the things where you really want to identify what you're going to do going forward for this company. And they want an action plan and a roadmap. So when you're thinking about a roadmap, and she in this case told you it's IT based, it's technology and software based, and that's why they're using CTO and CIO, I would immediately think, okay, from that standpoint, then some of my questions would be like, are the four companies using the same type of IT software and technologies? And her answer was no in this case. I would say, okay, in that case, then one of my thoughts is to immediately think about what best way I would do a risk internal analysis of the IT departments for all the four companies that are acquired to see, what type of hardware, what type of software, what type of devices they have, and then see, is there any synergy there? Should we divest any hardware? Should we, respectfully speaking, downsize or think about or transfer employees to different functions? If you were combining them, you have to think about, let's say, what types of technology, proprietary info that can be synergized to create value for Trevor Incorporated as a whole, because ultimately that's the reason why you did an mergers and acquisition, to gain access to their whatever processes they have that's good, whatever proprietary information, technologies, as well as hopefully they're aligned with like your business goals. And at the same time, I think one part that you might have mentioned is, and one question that I thought was very important to ask was, we have to make sure that the business strategy of Trevor Incorporated is aligned with the IT departments of the acquired companies. So if Trevor Incorporated is a company that's very fast and agile and wants to definitely go into the cloud, and then two of your IT companies that you acquired is still using legacy products and servers, then definitely you would want to divest that. You can potentially divest it in software and equipment, and then sell them off and put them off as an allowance within your balance sheets, and then have more cash to use in terms of like improving your other departments. That's one potential recommendation going forward, but you wouldn't write that down as a recommendation. You would just write that down in your notes as well. Some other parts is pretty much like, I guess, identifying who the key stakeholders are. So key stakeholders. So I think that's always one thing you should always do for any type of company strategy case going forward, whether it's mergers, acquisitions, or strategy, is you have to identify who the key stakeholders are. So there's the IT employees, data scientists, engineers, and then the supporting employees that support them. Do we still need them in this case if we're combining them everything together? And yeah, so that's that. And then ultimately, I think the last part of it, the last element that she really stressed with me and that we talked about was basically, what is the ultimate vision in terms of technology and future technology, IT strategy for the company going forward. And then, of course, last one would be action plan. And then on the right side here, this is usually where I do a lot of the quantitative stuff. So I actually began this by saying, well, you mentioned market share and you mentioned profits going down, and I know that profits equals to revenue minus expenses. I actually asked her at this point, this was at that 30-second portion where she gave me time to think about my ideas. I said, okay, so here's the information I gathered. I think that it's very important to identify who the key stakeholders are. I know this is very IT-based. I know that there's going to be a lot of synergies, and you have to think about like the technological culture and the demographics of the people, like the demographics of the IT employees, so that when they combine together, are they going to be able to work together very well? And also what type of technologies and software they're using. And then in addition to that, is this the right direction you want me going forward? And at the same time, I have a few questions such as, what exactly do you mean by roadmap? And that's exactly what I said. And what she did was she said, so you're absolutely going in the right direction. You hit upon all the main points over here on the left side, but I think that in terms of your profits and revenues and expenses, you don't really need to dig deep into that, because specifically the CEO wants an action map and a roadmap done by the CTO and CIO. When you hear that immediately in your mind, bam, this is not a profit issue at all. What it tells you is that they inserted that information over here simply just to trip you up. So you can mention it, and it's always good to mention it because you want to always reiterate the information that you were given. But then as soon as she says that this is not the direction they're going toward, they specifically want an action plan and a roadmap, then just cross it out immediately and focus more on this part of it. And then that's how finally it came to fruition that we focused more on this portion over here. So all the information down below in this section. So basically my final recommendation was to them that, number one, when creating the roadmap, you can think of it as like a project implementation standpoint in terms of combining the IT departments together. And in doing so, you have to not only, number one, identify who the main stakeholders are. In this case, it's the IT employees, it's the data scientists, your engineers, all the people that is within the IT portion of the companies that are acquired. Number two is the synergies. In terms of synergies, what types of synergies and technology is aligned between the different IT departments? What types of technologies can we use? Is there outdated software technologies within an IT department? If there is, we can divest them outside, and because of divesting within that, it increases efficiency and it creates more value to us by bringing us potential value through selling of those assets that are old and legacy. And at the same time, I would also say that in terms of other issues, the political landscape, we just acquired 4 companies. Is there any types of, like, let's say, regulations out there saying like, oh, these 4 companies are very IT-based, just merged with Trevor Incorporated, and they made this conglomerate. Is this okay? What are some political ramifications? We have to do a risk analysis on that standpoint. And what type of, like, let's say, technologies are being currently used? Is it SAP? Is it cloud? Is it legacy servers? And then in doing so, we have to make sure that we consolidate all the software and technologies together going forward, and so that everyone's on the same page. And then my other recommendation is very important, is that we have to make sure that the business strategy of Trevor Incorporated, its ultimate mission and vision aligned with its products and services, is also aligned with IT. So we have to hire the right headcount and employees that can really bridge that gap between the technological part and the business part of it, and then be able to communicate the same verbiage, bring them together, and similar to what IDEO and IBM and these companies really did well back in the 90s. And in doing so, that can really help with the mergers and acquisitions and really help with efficiency and aligning business strategy and creating value for that going forward. And with that said, I would also then, I think my last part about it was go through the roadmap, and that would be my roadmap, beginning with everything I just mentioned, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and at the very end of it, monitor the situation by potentially bringing in other companies who have done mergers and acquisitions within the technology sphere, having them do maybe like an audit, or having them do like a risk analysis either internally or outsourcing it to them so that they can come inside and see that, okay, you guys have already identified what the main issues are. You guys have made an action plan 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is there anything else that we can do for you that you guys have not thought about? That can be the last part afterwards. And then finally, monitoring everything going forward. So having like a set team set aside on the side to always monitor everything between the consolidation of the IT software between this mergers and acquisition case. That would be my final recommendation to clients, and everything that was said must be taken into consideration when making the action plan going forward. And that was basically it. And then she came back to me and she said that this is one of those cases, mergers and acquisition cases, where number one, you had to make sure and isolate the fact that profits and information such as market share, that's irrelevant. So you have to get your mind out of that gutter right away. You have to think about the fact that, there's regulatory issues when you combine mergers and acquisitions, because you think about Microsoft dominating the Office market and all the companies they acquired. You're looking at Amazon right now. There's a lot of issues over there. At the same time, you have to think about identifying key stakeholders within the IT department, combining business and technology strategy together. You have to think about the industry as a whole. Maybe there's competitors out there, but at the same time, I would say if you were to go that route, I think she told me specifically that the information that would have been given is that you are now commanding 70% of the industry in terms of the whatever product and service you're in. So that goes along with going into the regulatory and political issues that you have to consider now that you're almost a monopoly, essentially. And then identifying going forward the key technologies and software to use, culture, the resources, activities, capabilities that can synergize and create value. And yeah, those are all the main points that they wanted to hit within this case. And in doing so, we basically just went through every single one of them and identified what they were. So this is the type of case where it's a lot of back and forth. There's two types of cases. I'm going to actually save this real fast. So, example case. By the way, guys, this was one of the harder cases that I've been given. A lot of times it's simply just, and I'll just give you one quick example after this one, and then we'll end. But over here, let's see. So this was a really good example of a high-level case where, shoot, where'd I go? Right now. This is a really good example where it's interviewer driven. So that's actually why I went for new. So there's two types of ways that an case interview is conducted. It's number one, either interviewer driven, where the interviewer will really guide you toward the path and then see if you can identify the key data. And then there's also the interviewee driven, of course, where you are asking questions, communicating at every point, and being very poised and interpersonal and respectful. So in the case that we just had over here, I would say is more of an interviewer driven one, because a lot of the information is information that you would have to really have her provide to you. for example, when I started going into the profits part, she then directed me more toward this other part, and she gave me a lot of information in regards to focusing more on the roadmap and focusing more on the IT and the synergies and the mergers and acquisitions parts of it. And then it's from there that I began formulating ideas and thoughts to create the final recommendation. So that's one example of that. I'm going to give one other quick. That was one of the harder cases I've done. Another really quick one, and I'm going to do this really fast. It should be no more than 10 minutes, guys, and we'll end from there and leave for question and answers. So company X has, what is it? Let's see. Has, company X is a is a cruise company, and its profits have been going down year by year. Explain why. That's it. That's really all you have. So immediately you can put it into the structure that you mentioned, but right from here, it's very clear cut that this is going to be a profit issue. So if I were to have my sheet that you showed the interviewer, I would immediately write down revenue equals to, profit equals to revenue minus cost. I need to make this a little bigger. From here, you have this. From here, you have this. The revenue is you have your volume, or you can call it quantity, times price of the product. I guess in this case it will be a price of a ticket. And then over here, cost, you have your variable, and then you have your fixed. And then you can talk to the interviewer and you can say, fixed is along the lines of, thinking about a cruise ship, like the ship cost, the ship leasing or purchasing of owning the ship or owning the ship, infrastructure, insurance, headcount, all those things. And then variable cost, that can be broken down deeper into, again, cost times the number of, again, volume, which is the number of people on the ship. So then going over here, I can ask her questions like, okay, well, my hypothesis is that this is a profit issue, so therefore we have to consider revenue and cost. And I'm going to begin first by thinking about the revenue standpoint. My question for you is, in terms of revenue, there's always the volume, the number of people who are purchasing tickets to the ship, and there's also a price. Do you have any information regarding that? And then she'll give you information like a sheet, and then I'm going to write it down real quickly over here. So Exhibit 1, you identified exactly what type of framework you're going to use, and in Exhibit 1, you're going to identify exactly what type of information you need, which is financial information. It shows you that 2012, your revenue, 2012, your revenue was, let's say, $500 billion. And then 2011, your revenue was $400 billion. Okay, so you were just given this information. Trevor, what takeaway do you have from this in terms of like the revenue? Trevor, you still there, buddy? Okay. Sagarika, can you hear me right now?
Yeah, Tony.
Okay. So, based off of this exhibit, what information takeaways can you get from this right now?
I would assume that our revenues have increased, but then I think there are some variable costs which you have to consider and look into.
Exactly. So before we go into the cost part of it, Your
Okay.
hypothesis was that you think that the issue was within revenue, and you just mentioned that revenue increased. So that
Yes.
essentially eliminates what your original hypothesis is. So you're given this exhibit, and then you would then say, "Thank you for the data. Thank you for the data. Um, Based off of the information, I can see that revenue is not the issue here, and my original hypothesis was not correct. Therefore, I would like to shift toward the cost section of the profit analysis." And that right there shows you that this is exactly what you would do in a client situation. If the client were to give you information, or you were to, let's say, interview somebody within the team in that company, and then this is exactly what you would say. And then you would now go into costs, and then you would say, okay, well, I know that cost is variable and fixed and everything. Can you give me information in regards to the fixed cost? And then he or she will say, well, fixed cost, there's no information regarding that. It's always been the same, no, regardless of what the customers are, number of customers are. And you'll be, okay, all right. In that case, then fixed cost is something that should not be considered anymore. But you can always say, fixed cost is shipping, leasing, and ownership of the ship, infrastructure, insurance, headcount. Those are what fixed costs are. Do you have any information on that? That shows you that you understand specifically what the fixed costs are for that company. And that is something that's very good skill set to have when you're going into an industry you're not very familiar with, to have a general understanding of what their costs are and what their types of expenses are. So then I would say, okay, so then I think it's going to come down toward the variable cost within the cost structure, and that's the cost per customer in terms of the variable cost per customer in terms of maintaining this company, a cruise ship, as well as the number of volume. So do you have any information regarding variable cost and volume cost? And then what she'll tell you in this case is that the costs actually stay the same,
Okay.
but the volume changed. So the cost, she gave me an exhibit, and the exhibit pretty much said that the main takeaway over there was that cost stayed the same. So then what that tells me is that there's an issue over here with volume, and something in terms of the number of customers going on cruise ships from the cost side is what's really driving costs to increase, and that's why your profits are decreasing. So with that said, I would ask her then, from this standpoint over here, do you have any information on the number of customers, as well as number of customers on the trip? And she'll give information, Exhibit 3, on the number of customers, and then you're thinking, okay, so from there, can I really identify, what does that really tell me? I know the number of customers who are purchasing the cruise ship. Does that really tell me any information about how it's driving up cost? No. What you would really need to know in this case is market information, such as
Competitors.
Is the industry currently heading,
Yeah.
demographic. So just to quickly, high-level standpoint, market information now. So this is what I mean by customization in terms of frameworks. You started out with profit, but now you identified that it's a volume question. So the volume means number of customers. And then when you talk about number of customers, you now have to get into the market information. So I asked her information regarding, is the cruise industry, do you have any information on the trend of the cruise industry? Then I asked her, do you have competitor information? And based off of this, the information that was given to me was broken down into So um, the current, I better make this smaller fonts. So this is the last exhibit she gave me. The current industry demographic is positioned for company X as millennials. This is an industry, and then she gave me data that showed that the industry is decreasing. That is decreasing in number of customers that will purchase tickets. However, in addition to that, there's information that Generation Y, Generation Z, and are increasing in terms of number of customers purchasing the tickets. And then for competitor information, what she provided to me was that the competition is fierce, so the competitors all have similar pricing. And also, it's a number 4, very hard industry to enter. Competition internally is driven by pricing. So looking at this information to me right now, I can make 2 takeaways. The number 1 takeaway is that your volume in terms of your cost is potentially decreasing because your millennials, the company your demographic of millennials that you're positioned as is decreasing in the number of customers. You might want to focus more on Generation Y and Generation Z in terms of customer purchasing the tickets. But that doesn't really make sense to me, because if your number of customers is decreasing because you're targeting millennials and they're decreasing, then your variable cost should not be increasing. So that is the main takeaway I get from there, but I don't think that's the root cause of the problem. So I'm going to now take a look at the competitor information you gave to me. Competition is very fierce. Competitors all have similar pricing. It's a hard industry to enter, and competition internally is driven by pricing. What this tells me is that this is a very price-sensitive industry. 5, price-sensitive industry. So what I would then ultimately, based off of this information at this point, this is all the exhibits that were given to me and the only ones that were possibly given to you. So we use all our exhibits so far. I would come down and say, okay, thank you for all this information. If I were to talk to the client right now, what I would say is this. This is an issue in which case we dig into the revenues and the cost. Your revenues have clearly been increasing, so that's a good sign. But at the same time, your cost and your cost has been in that case. Then, because your profits are decreasing, your costs must be increasing. Your revenues are increasing as well. However, digging deeper into it, fixed cost is okay. There's everything they're saying the same. Variable cost, in terms of the cost per customer, that stayed the same. In terms of volume, it appears as if that the trend in the industry is that your current number of customers purchasing the tickets has been decreasing because you're positioning and targeting millennials. So my recommendation to you would be potentially to increase the cost. However, based off of the competitor information that was given to me, your customers are very price sensitive, but your customers that we just discussed are millennials. So maybe we can do some market research, and then maybe we can target now Generation Y and Z, which, given information from the last exhibit, Generation Y and Z is an increasing industry in terms of the number of customers. So what we can do then is we can go back, given all this information, the cost side of it really is stagnant. It's an industry that's decreasing. I would recommend going back to revenue and then trying to make marketing promotions and target Generation Y and Z. This way you can increase the number of people purchasing your tickets, because in the long run, if you continue with millennials, it's a decreasing number of customers and industry. Your ultimate profit is going to go down in the long run. So you would diversify and go with generation Y and Z because of their increasing trend. And in doing so, that would increase and drive the volume that's driving up the revenue in this case. And then for your cost structure, going back now, we originally thought it was a revenue issue, then we thought it was a cost issue. After looking at the demographic information and looking at the market information, we ultimately came back to the final recommendation that you should target and diversify Generation Y and Z individuals. And in doing so, you would drive up your volume, but at the same time, keep your prices the same because the industry is very price sensitive. You do not want to have a price war. And that would be my final recommendation to you as a client. And that was basically digging deep into going from point A to point B to point C, and then figuring out what the root cause analysis was. So originally we thought it was revenue. We showed them that we understood how to read exhibit to prove that wrong, that it might be a cost issue. Digging deep into cost issue, it really became more of a market and demographic information case. And from there, we went back away from cost and went back into revenue to show that if we were to target more and diversify more our customer base, that would drive up the number of customers. And because it's price sensitive, we would keep the price the same and the revenue would increase. In this case, cost, your variable cost, of course, is going to increase because your volume is increasing. But no matter what, regardless, because the industry of Generation Y and Z is increasing, we believe that, and our assumption is that going forward, this will ultimately drive your profit going forward. You have to be able to put safeguards in place and for the future. And looking at it, millennials should not be the only target audience segmentation, SCP analysis, whatever you want to call it. You want to target Generation Y and Z as well as potentially millennials going forward. So that was, I know that wasn't 10 minutes, but that was sort of like if you were to go into a case and you practice it enough, you can figure out this within a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. And that's an example from a profit standpoint. So yeah, that's 2 examples right over there that I gave. I now leave the floor for questions.
I had a query here. So, okay, we don't have any information regarding the services which the other companies offer. So, can we ask about that as well? I mean, though they didn't give that, we can say that in the recommendation that we can look into the services offered by the other competitors because the pricing is the same.
Yeah, that you can absolutely ask that, and I think that they actually said that they intuitively you would have to analyze. They gave you the information, but in a very, I guess, discreet way. They said that it's very hard to enter into the industry. The competition internally is driven by pricing. So based off of that, I think it's better to take that information and then say, well, based off of this information, my analysis is that the competitor's pricing is staying the same because if you were to change the pricing, increase the pricing, you're going to lose customers because the industry is very competitive and it's very price sensitive. So that shows you that you can take information that wasn't directly saying that they're price sensitive and their pricing is the same, but intuitively from the information they gave you, you're able to analyze it and make a takeaway that it is a price sensitive industry. Does that make sense, sort of that way?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that's that. Then those are the 2 examples. I have a lot of resources and materials. I think, for example, I think that there's, let's see, let's go to the next. Just real quickly, I think that Google.com. Case in point. So this book over here is a very good book to start out with. It tells you all the main, I guess like the main types of case interview questions, the mindset going into it. I have the PDF version. Please glip me or email me. I'll provide my email at the end of this at the very end. And going down to the book contents, they go over why consulting, blah blah blah. I think the stuff we already covered, but then most importantly, like I think it's good to go over the purpose of the case question. We sort of went over that as well to understand your business intuition and how you would think in a real world setting, professional setting. But I think the big parts of it is practice cases. So they have 35 practice cases that involve market entry, that involve profit and loss, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring of a company, process improvements, let's say supply chain, vendor relationship management, negotiations, all those things. They give you 12 case scenarios, so like the types of scenarios that you would have within case interviews. And then again, they dig deep into the framework. So I mentioned the 4 C's and the 4 P's, or the 5 C's and the 4 P's, BCG matrix, Porter's 5 forces. This is the 7S here is the McKinsey 7S framework, the value chain, income statement. All these things are over here. This is a great way to put a great starting point and reference point. I also have a lot of articles, a lot of other resources as well from a high level standpoint that dives into like brain teasers, how to market size, and how to take information like such as your what do you think is the total number of steaks eaten within the Southwest region of the United States industry, United States demographic or geography within a single day. How can you answer that type of question? That's going to be a lot of mathematical questionnaires in your head, and I have resources that can explain that, but I'm not going to dig deep into that today. So it's already, in terms of the time, it's already 11:10. So thank you for sticking with me throughout this entire session. I know it's very comprehensive and a lot of information. I'm glad that we went over 2 case examples. One was very specific and high level that required about an hour or so. Another one was something that I dived deep into it, but ultimately probably should have took you about 10 minutes if you were to practice it deeply. And then I have resources and information going on forward. My information for those of you is, if you guys want to write this down for those who are not familiar with me, is this is my main email. In addition to case interviews, I also do a lot of mock interviews, creating pitches, how to research and position yourself for a job fair, how to do research entering into an interview, what types of questions to ask your interviewer. These are all things that I try to help on, and I think a few people within this Skype, as well as people outside of Skype, will tell you that I've done this plenty of times, and it's definitely created value for them. So if you liked what you saw today, please reach out to me. I'm already at a point where I'm pretty much negotiating offers, so I'm pretty much just chilling and just making sure that I continue on the good work within ICON as well as within my other responsibilities on campus and finishing up. I'm not going to put my number on here, but yeah, here's my contact information. If you have any questions at all, if you want the resources, please reach out to me with this email address. And I now leave the floor for any other questions before we end the session. Any questions at all? Okay, well, with that said, then thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.